Okay, so thank you very much for coming to the Tunstall Bay Water System Information Meeting. We've got 3 members of the public. That's wonderful. And as we said, the meeting will be recorded. So please ask questions if you feel the need throughout the meeting, and there'll also be an allotted amount of time at the end for more thorough discussion. We're going to start with an overview of the system and rates and consumption. And that's going to be Annette Frischman, our utilities coordinator.
Thanks, Steph. I'll give you a quick overview of the Tunstall Bay rate structure.
Are you going to share screen, Steph?
Yes, Steph, are you going to play the, thanks.
Here it comes.
Go ahead, Annette.
In 2019, there were 129 connected properties in Tunstall Bay and 12 unconnected properties. And the water source are drilled groundwater wells. The meters are read 4 times a year on about February 1st, May 1st, August 1st, and November 1st. And in 2019, the annual base rate for the connected lots was $700, and the annual base rate for the unconnected was $420. In 2020, this went slightly up with to $815 for the connected lots and $500 for the unconnected lots. The users are also paying for each gallon of water that they use. According to what you can see on the slide here. So the first 1,500 gallons per month are billed at a rate of 0.00245, and then the next $1,500 of usage are billed at the 0.00441, etc. The bills are issued directly after the meters are read in February, May, August, and November. I'd like to encourage the Tunstall Bay water users to sign up on our website, and I believe the link is included in the agenda. So we can contact you faster if you have a leak by email instead of by letter only. And so there is no, so we don't lose much time to find the leak, fix the leak. Do you have any questions about the rate structure?
So it looks like we just have Jerry joining us. Welcome, Jerry. Okay, moving on to the consumption.
I have put together a little consumption graph showing both the consumption for 2018 and for 2019. And in 2019, the consumption was slightly lower, the average annual with 35,000 and about 600 imperial gallons per connection, versus actually 45,800 gallons the year before in 2018, which is 98 gallons per day per connection in 2019 versus 113 gallons per day per connection in 2018. Yes, that is about all that the graph shows. Are there any questions on this consumption graph?
Annette, were
Yes.
there any leaks in any properties? Would that be part of the reason for the really high ones?
Yes, there were a couple of leaks in 2019, which is usually the reason.
I also believe one of those high ones is the swimming pool.
The pool, yeah, and leaks, but those would account for the very high numbers. If there are no questions on this, I'll hand over to you, Raj.
Thanks, Annette. So moving into the financial information section, I'm going to be going over the operating financial results for 2019 and the capital results. And then I'll go over the 5-year financial plan for both operating and capital, and the presentation with just reviewing your reserve balances and an estimated replacement cost value of the Tunstall Bay water system. So in terms of the 2019 operating results, I'm going to go over the 2019 results, variances to budget, and 2018 numbers are provided for context. So on the revenues, our annual revenues for 2019 are 134,000, and there's a 14,000 favorable variance to budget. In the water utility fees, the 7,800 favorable variance is due to an adjustment that related to 2018. The 2018 revenue was understated by that amount due to a estimate error in the accrual. And so we picked up that revenue in 2019, and the return on investments. So basically the reserve funds are invested with the MFA, and the actual return on investment is higher than what was budgeted for. And so we'll be taking a look at our budgeted numbers for 2020 onwards and adjusting accordingly. In terms of the expenses for Tunstall Bay operating expenses totaled 102,600. You don't see that number on your list, but what the 102,600 is a sum of the lines from the 54,000 right down to the 897. So if you exclude the transfer to reserves, the operating expenses were 102,600. The budget for those expenses was 81,200. So the expenses for Tunstall Bay were 21,400, unfavorable to variance or higher than budgeted. The budget variance essentially came primarily from spending on supplies and services, which exceeded the budget due to additional waterworks requirements. There was increased cost for supplies and materials related to pumps and power and service supply of transmission and distribution hydrant maintenance. So there's some troubleshooting done on the analog modules, and additional maintenance was required from Gibson Waterworks for works there. Staff compensation, again, there was more overtime spent in 2019 to address issues across water systems. Hence, there was more spending on labor in comparison to what was budgeted. So overall, in terms of the transfer to the capital reserves, there was 31,500 transferred to reserves during the year, which was about 6,900 shy of the budgeted number. Are there any questions on the 2019 operating results? There being none, I'm going to move forward to the next slide, which will summarize the 2019 capital results. And in 2019, we spent $17,769 on finishing up the reservoir upgrade pre-design. That was a project that was approved in 2018. So we carried forward funds into 2019. That's why you're not seeing it. It was not budgeted in 2019. And essentially, there was an allocation on, or rather there was minor spending in the equipment and infrastructure renewal of 731. So for total capital expenditures of 18,500, which were funded from the capital reserve for Tunstall Bay. Any questions on the 2019 capital results? There being none, we'll move forward then to the 5-year operating plan. So the next slide shows the 2020 to 2024 5-year financial plan for operating. And essentially, inflation has been used to estimate what the annual increase in each area of cost will be in terms of building up the 5-year financial plan. Any questions on the 5-year financial plan? If not, then we'll move to the next slide, which essentially is the 5-year financial plan for capital. Sorry, I was one slide ahead of myself. So the 2020 projects in this table here are projects that were reviewed with the, well, actually all of the projects for 2020 to 2024 were reviewed with the LAC last year, and essentially formed part of the capital plan for 5 years. So the big ticket item was the Tunstall Bay storage tank. So the 2020 budget provision included scoping and design approval with construction anticipated or budgeted for in 2021. In the coming months, we will be working on the budget, operating and capital budget for 2021 to 2025. So these outer year capital numbers will be recreated based on anticipated requirements for the upcoming 5 years. And we'll be touching base with the LAC in late October, early November on capital projects proposed or required for the 2021 to 2025 years. Can we go to the next slide, Steph? So this slide here shows the reserve balances for 2018 and 2019. So 2018 had a closing balance of 230,800 in reserves, which became the opening balance for 2019. There's a contribution to reserves in 2019 of 31,573. You would have seen that in the operating statement earlier, and 18,500 of reserve funds was used for expenditures made in 2019 to fund capital works, essentially leaving us with a closing balance of just shy of $244,000 for 2019 in the reserve. So that there is an issue here that you should be aware of. Your reserve has $244,000, and the anticipated cost of proceeding with the replacement of a tank is over $540,000. We'll probably get better estimates this year. So the reserve balance is not adequate to fund the replacement of the tank. So either we will need to find a funding solution to address replacement of the tank in 2021 if that is going to move forward. Any questions on reserves?
Just a reminder that you please don't be shy to ask questions. This is what we're here for.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Oh, good.
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm just really curious about something. I'm sorry I came in late to the meeting, but I couldn't get the link. So the tank we have was established when there was only less than 25% of the homeowners were permanent homeowners. Now I would say the majority, like 90% of the lots, are permanent homeowners. We are in a very delicate situation where we could run out of water in the case of a fire out at Roger Curtis, for example. It's been documented that it would take 20 minutes to drain that tank. We need a reserve tank desperately. And I think I have been on and off this board for the past 8 years, and we keep getting the same runaround. And I'm sorry, but this is nonsense. If you can't find the money to supply the residents of Bowen Island with water, there's something really wrong with your financing.
Well, actually, the funding for each water system comes from the users of that system. There is no funding source for, no other funding source for water. So that's typically how utilities work in all municipalities. So your contributions from Tunstall Bay have not been sufficient to support your infrastructure in the past. So really what that's saying is your rates need to go up to support your contribution to reserves to support your water system. Or if we were to borrow money, then the cost of that borrowing would need to be paid through, again, an increase in rates in the water system. So really the rates have not been sufficient to take care of the infrastructure and the infrastructure needs of the Tunstall Bay system. So we will be working on finding a solution to funding this initiative if required.
I understand what you're saying, but in this day and age when interest rates are so low, I think it is very, very important that this gets done soon, because we're just putting it off, and it's becoming more and more precarious for the Tunstall Bay residents.
We are moving forward with this. We've got an RFP posted that closes soon to hire a consultant team that will be doing a number of waterworks designs for the island, including the Tunstall Bay Reservoir. Part of that work is going to be to confirm what the size of the tank should be for fire protection needs. So we'll be moving forward with that work this fall, and so we do recognize the urgency, and that's a priority project for us.
I'm sorry, I don't know who you are.
Sorry, my name is Patrick. I'm Director of Engineering.
Oh, nice to meet you.
So yeah, I mean, I started in this job earlier this year, and there's a lot of really significant infrastructure needs on the island, and this is one of them. So we're moving forward with it.
Well, I appreciate that.
And part of the, once we understand better what, the design and the costs are, then we'll have to look at what the financing arrangements will need to be. And that will likely need to be some borrowing to be paid back over time. Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay.
So the last, if we're going back to the PowerPoint steps, the last slide in the financial presentation is an estimated value of the replacement cost of the Tunstall Bay infrastructure. So related to what we were talking about earlier, the replacement cost of the infrastructure for the Tunstall Bay system is estimated to be about $4,100,000. And it's just highlighting that essentially, if you go back to the slide previous to this, the closing balance in the reserves is about $244,000. Go back a couple of slides prior to, oh, actually you don't have to go back. Can we just go back to that slide again? And the annual contribution to reserves is about $31,000. So generally speaking, I'm just repeating myself, saying that essentially our reserve balances are light in contrast to the age and replacement value of the infrastructure in Tunstall Bay, which is not unique to Tunstall Bay. That is a common theme across all of our water systems. So we are looking at needing to move towards becoming more sustainable in building up our reserves to be able to address infrastructure needs, infrastructure requirements. And that concludes the financial part of the presentation. Are there any questions on any of the slides? I'd be happy to go back and answer any questions that may have come up afterwards in your minds.
Yeah, I had a couple. Could you contrast the tank replacement costs of 500,000 versus the infrastructure replacement cost of 4 million? What's the plan there? And
question again? Sorry, I missed part of that. The sound gave out when you were talking on my computer.
Okay, you've got 540 for the tank replacement this year, and then you have infrastructure replacement costs of 4.1 million or whatever it was. Can you just contrast those? Like the 4 million is over what period? I mean, what are we talking about replacing? Obviously, it's not a tank.
So the 4 million is a number. If you had to replace the entire infrastructure of the Tunstall Bay water system, so all of the equipment, the buildings, the linear,
everything, hookups, pipes, you name it, the whole thing.
Yeah. So it's unlikely you would have to replace everything all at once, but it's generally speaking for new infrastructure, the rule of thumb is that you should be putting about 1% of the value replacement cost of your infrastructure into reserves. And that's for new infrastructure. So that would indicate that the annual contribution for new infrastructure should be about $41,000 a year. Aged infrastructure. So all I can say, I mean, kind of just looking at these slides, what I can say is our contribution should be somewhat higher than $41,000 a year. Quite a bit higher than that, given the age of the system.
Right. And then so our base water rates went up, what was that, 16%, 700 to 850 per hookup?
For 2020, yes.
Okay, so what do you think?
An increase, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so what do you think? Are we going to see a continued base rate increase over the next 5 years to put a Band-Aid on this, or are we borrowing? What's your plan? What do you think we're going to do to facilitate the tank and manage the costs?
Well, we're going to be working on the financial plan in the budget. I would suspect that there will be a recommendation to the LAC to increase rates as I go through the budget process. I mean, I haven't started on our 2021 budget process. And so I definitely, more funding is needed to fund the system. So I'll be discussing that with our engineer as we go through your infrastructure and operating costs and revenue models for the year. So just to point out that even though there was about a 14-15% increase in 2020, I believe rates had not been increased probably 4 to 5 years before that. They had remained stable. So whereas most municipalities are seeing 5 to 10% annual increases in their water utility rates.
Yeah, and we had only recently moved to a metered situation, which I think was the right idea. And I hear what Gay's saying, the cost of borrowing is low right now, but who knows in a year or two, as we try and bounce back from all of this money that's being handed out to people, the cost of borrowing could change.
Yeah. So what we'll be looking at is grant opportunities. And we'll also, I mean, if borrowing is recommended by your local advisory committee, there is a process around borrowing in the municipality. We can't just go out to the bank and borrow. We have to first get council approval. And so essentially council approval would be required, and then we go through the ministry. So there is a whole process to follow when we go through borrowing. It's not as simple as we need to do this project and staff can go out and approach the bank to borrow to fund that project. There is a process that you have to go through.
How soon can we start that process?
That process would come out of the budget process. So essentially what there would be is a recommendation from if your local advisory committee felt borrowing, they would recommend to council. to instruct staff to commence the borrowing process as an outcome of the budget process. So it would be what we identify for 2021 as the funding source for that project. And given that the reserve balances are not inadequate or are not adequate to fund that, we would first take a look at grant opportunities if there are any. And then beyond the grant opportunities, I believe borrowing would be the next step or recommendation to proceed with being able to carry out this project.
That doesn't give me a timeline. I mean, I feel an urgency because we are having new places being built out here. There are bigger places being built out on the Cape. The stress on our system is just out of hand right now. And as I said, 8 years on this board and we've gotten nowhere. It's just incomprehensible. That
I think what we need to do is we first of all, as Patrick was mentioned earlier, that we are doing the scoping and design and approval part of the process, and that is going to inform us as to what the cost is going to be. So right now we have a placeholder in 2021 for $540,000. So at this point, without that work being done, we wouldn't even know what we need to borrow. So we need to first establish what the estimated cost of that is going to be, because a borrowing bylaw, you have to specify the amount you're going to borrow. So if we can't just go out and borrow for an unspecified amount, so the borrowing bylaw that would go to the province, I mean, and in that process, so getting back to your question, when we're going through the budgeting process, I believe we'll be in a position where we will have a better idea of what the cost to construct that tank is going to be. We'll also be seeking out grant opportunities, and at that point, we will have a better idea of what we need to borrow. And I would anticipate that the essentially the recommendation to council would be to borrow. And then we have to make an application to the ministry, and the ministry accepts application. There's like basically funds.
Okay, I understand there's a lot of
during the year. Yeah.
So, okay, I understand that. But the cost of doing this could be put towards a tank.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving forward with the design and cost estimating for the tank.
Okay.
That's going to take some time. We'll have a consultant on board in October. It's probably going to take until early spring to have a design in place. And so we'll be moving forward with the financing arrangements in parallel with the design process. And our hope is that we can move into construction in the second half of next year. That's the objective. That's as quickly as we'd be able to do it if we don't run into unexpected challenges, if you're looking for a time frame.
Thank you for giving me a timeline. I appreciate that.
Sorry, I just want to jump in because people were arriving at different times, just to review. I'm the committee clerk. Raj is the chief financial officer. Pat, the guy in the car, is our director of engineering. And Annette is our utilities coordinator. And Allison Morris is our council liaison. Just if that didn't happen properly before. Does anyone have more questions?
Thank you.
Patrick's going to be doing a review of public works too. Is there anything else about finances that people would like to discuss? Okay, so on our agenda, there was a 55-page document included, which is the annual report to Vancouver Coastal Health. This has information about water quality operations, staffing, etc. That was published on our website. Does anyone have any questions for the Public Works Department regarding the Vancouver Coastal Health Report? Hearing none. I think there was also the RFP was linked to our agenda, which Patrick's referred to earlier in the meeting. Does anyone have any more questions for Patrick about the RFP? Hearing none. I think that's it. We will be having a local advisory committee meetings in late October / early November, primarily to review the budget, but that's also the opportunity for the local advisory committees to vote on recommendations to council. I don't know if you're happy about the chat that we have on Zoom, but I did include my email address there because we are looking for new members for the local advisory committee. So if anyone wants to have their say with council, this is your chance. Please shoot me an email and I can get you an application to join the committee. Yeah. Okay. Raj, Patrick, you okay with saying adieu to all these lovely people?
Yeah, sure.
these
If there's no more
concerned-
questions, I'm happy to answer questions, but if there isn't any, that's fine.
We appreciate your concern and your input.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to end the
Thanks.
meeting now. Have a wonderful day. Stay
Have a good day.
safe.
Thanks, Steph.
Bye now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right.